a little bit of looking forward, and also, while we're at it, a little bit of looking back as well. On today's edition of Locked On LSU, I'll give out my game balls, offense, defense, and special teams. Plus, we'll start to look ahead to LSU starting SEC play against Mississippi State on Saturday. All that and more on today's edition of Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. I have been covering LSU football since 2016, and I now host a sports talk radio show for ESPN 1025 The Game in Nashville, Tennessee. You can find us on whatever your preferred podcast platform is. You can also find us on YouTube as well. So you can watch us on the go, listen to us on the go, throw us up on your smart TV, however you prefer to watch. You can do that with audio, and you can also do it with video as well. But before we move forward, looking to that game against Mississippi State, huge game. LSU starting SEC play. Brian Kelly's first SEC game as an SEC head coach. I mean, there's big implications for this game. And starting 1-2 is not necessarily the expectation for year one for Brian Kelly, not for us as fans, and also probably not within that building as well. But we'll get into all of that. We'll get into the nitty gritty, the X's and O's, the on the field stuff, the off the field stuff, the implications of the game. We'll get into that today, and also as we go on throughout the week as well. But before we do that, I want to wrap up my thoughts on the Southern game, what I saw from the Southern game, the good things that I saw. So I'm going to give out my game balls from the game against Southern, and I will continue to do this every single week as a recap for every game: offense, defense, special teams, who deserves the game ball, who had the most highlighted performance, either one, two, or a group of players who I really thought shined in that first game. So looking at the offensive game balls, I feel like there was a very obvious one here, and there was a very not so obvious one here. I have that for offense and for defense. One that was like, yeah, duh, that's a gimme, but also a player that maybe went under the radar or didn't get, the most obvious quote unquote game ball, didn't get the most obvious, love for that game. So my most obvious game ball for that game against Southern was Jayden Daniels, obviously. And my thing here is, I'm never going to rip on or criticize or question the decision making of a player one week, and they turn around and seem to figure those things out, or they have a good performance, and then not give them credit for that. I will give credit where credit is due, and I very much so will give criticism where criticism is due. I'm going to be completely fair here. So as much as I really, and honest, to be completely fair, I didn't criticize Jayden Daniels very harshly after that Florida State game because I didn't think that was necessarily justified. I think a lot of LSU fans were criticizing him pretty harshly, saying that he was the problem, calling for Garrett Nussmeier. I wasn't doing any of that, and I think I made that fairly clear during the Florida State game and also in the aftermath as well, in my breakdowns of those games. But there were some situations in that game against Florida State where I thought Jayden Daniels looks incredibly uneasy, uncomfortable, not very confident. He doesn't want to stand back in the pocket. He doesn't want to go through those progressions. He just wants to immediately jet off and run. And I thought that was a problem that needed to be fixed. And I saw that at least fixed or improved upon against Southern, because there were several moments in that game against Southern where I think that he could have, if he felt a little bit of pressure, he could have just gone off and run. And maybe he would have made a play doing so. But if you're going to have to fix those, I don't want to call it a confidence issue, but one of those problems or little tweaks in your game that are going to be more difficult to implement against a Mississippi State or a Florida or an SEC opponent, you have to start making those habits and building those habits and changing, whatever was a habit before against the gimmies. You got to do it against Southern. If you can't drop back in the pocket against Southern, you're not going to do it against Mississippi State. So I like to see that Jayden Daniels was making some of those changes and looked like a much, much, much more confident passer against Southern. 10 of 11, 137 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Absolute offensive fireworks in the first quarter from Jayden Daniels. Of course, he wasn't out there too long. He didn't need to be. Of course, I know I'm couching all of my takes from Southern saying it's Southern. I understand that there is much, much, much more difficult foes and down the line. There's a lot more work to be done, but we're going to take the wins where we can get them. And I like to see that Jayden Daniels was making some of those fixes that we saw in the Florida State game in the Southern game as well. But I think one player that wasn't the obvious game ball, in my opinion, Jayden Daniels was the obvious offensive game ball, just by what he did, and also considering, how apprehensive he was to pass the ball, at least in the first half, first three quarters against Florida State. It was nice to see those changes made. But the one that's not obvious, I think, was Malik Neighbors. I mean, this kid was the two muffed punts heard around the world a couple Sundays ago. And rightfully so. You cannot make those mistakes. You cannot drop those balls. I mean, special teams are gimmies. You got to take the gimmies whenever you can get them. I don't care who your opponent is. And Malik Neighbors didn't do that. But as a receiver, even against Florida State and also against Southern as well, I think Malik Neighbors has shown a whole lot of promise. And he led the team in receiving yards, 81 yards on 3 receptions. That he had that 160-yard bomb and a touchdown as well against Southern. So a big comeback from Malik Neighbors. I understand his blunders didn't come in the passing game. They came in special teams. But I think that there's a big confidence issue there that could be there. I'm not talking about specifically Malik Neighbors, but just in general. I think there's a big confidence thing that could really kind of hit you moving forward, that you could get in this funk, or you could get this bug that you just can't seem to shake after a bad game. I mean, that happens. I mean, sports are mental. We didn't see that from Malik Neighbors, so good to see them moving forward, although he is not, at least against Southern, was not on the punt return team. It was good to see him taking care of business and doing his job on the offensive side of things. So Jayden Daniels and Malik Neighbors get my offensive game balls. But moving to the defensive side of the ball, one guy that I did not expect this much from, but I am very, very, very pleased, is Micah Baskerville. I mean, that man was all over the place against Southern on Saturday night. And we didn't really hear a whole lot about Micah Baskerville in camp. He wasn't taking first team or even very many second team reps as well. He was just kind of flying under the radar in training camp. And I think that may have been due to the fact that Micah Baskerville was supposed to be ineligible, at least for the first 2 games of the year. It could have been even longer. So of course, whatever eligibility issue he was facing, obviously he played against Southern, so that wasn't an issue anymore, but he had the pick 6. Micah Baskerville was all over the place, and he needs to be playing. He needs to be a starting defensive player on this LSU team because he has such good awareness. I mean, and he is a ball player now. He's an incredibly physical linebacker. And I think, too, looking at this, not just the defensive line, but that full front, the defensive front for LSU, there's so many players that have proved to be able to plug and play in different areas. I wouldn't be surprised to see Micah Baskerville kind of plugging and playing at different areas on that front end as well. But also Harold Perkins gets another one of my defensive game balls. I really liked what I saw from him against Florida State. And, he really shined against Southern. Whenever some of those guys that were a little bit lower on the depth chart, they got their opportunity, and I think that's great. I mean, Harold Perkins had the dumb penalty against Florida State. You cannot have unsportsmanlike conduct penalties like that. It's just dumb stuff that hurts the team. But Harold Perkins led the team in tackles. He had 7 total tackles on the night. He played in several different positions as well. He not only filled in on the on the defensive line, but he also took some linebacker snaps as well. So again, that entire defensive unit, just showing off that depth there, the depth and the skill and just the sheer size on some of these young guys. I mean, Harold Perkins does not look like a true freshman. Harold Perkins is going to be a problem moving forward. So Micah Baskerville and Harold Perkins, 2 guys that, they're not your Ali Gays, they're not your BJ Ojolaris. They're not going to be, your front men. They're not going to be the faces of your defense, but they absolutely, I think, have laid the foundation to become that and to be serious playmakers and disruptors moving forward. So that was another thing I liked, was Harold Perkins and Micah Baskerville. And with special teams, gosh, it was so nice to have something nice to say about special teams this week. We love growth and we love improvement. But on special teams, I was tempted to just give the game ball to special teams as a whole for figuring the things out, from going from, 2 muffed punts to, a couple solid punt returns. So that was good. I was tempted to just give it to the team as a whole, but we don't do that around here. We do not do that around here. But Gregory Clayton had a nice little 18-yard punt return there. Good, fine, solid. I don't need I don't need a return for 40, 50, 60 yards. Just, take care of the football and gain the yardage wherever you can get it. So Gregory Clayton gets a special teams ball as well as Damian Ramos. He made all 8 of his extra points. Good. Those are the gimmies. Those seem like very, very boring game balls to give. A punt returner who caught the punt and returned it for 18 yards. And then also your kicker who's making all of his extra points, 8 of them at that. That's a lot. It's hefty. But that's a good problem to have. But they did their job. And I think that after that performance against Florida State, that's all we can ask from the special teams unit. Pick up the gimmies, get the points where you can get them, play clean football, and then move forward from there. So Jayden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Micah Baskerville, Harold Perkins, Damian Ramos, and Gregory Clayton, they get my game balls against Southern. But coming up next, let's go ahead and move forward. Southern was a great win. It was a fun game. It was a confidence builder for LSU. Let's push that to the rear view. On to Mississippi State, on to Mike Leach and the Bulldogs. So Brian Kelly spoke with the media the other day, and he gave a couple updates about players that we did not see against Southern. And so we will get into that coming up next. Before we do that, I want to tell you about the Upside app. So from cringing at the pump to getting an eye-popping check at your favorite restaurant, inflation is hitting all of us and it's hitting us hard. I know my grocery bill is significantly higher these days than it was a couple of years ago, and I'm not buying really much more. And it really, really hurts. So that's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out, aka all of us. So with every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. I've made it a priority of mine of whenever I spend money, I want to get something in return back. And that's what you can do with Upside. So whenever I go fill up my gas tank, I just bring up my Upside app and it almost feels like, hey, it's too good to be true, but I've used it and it works. Every time I fill up my tank of gas, I use the Upside app. It is an absolute no-brainer because why wouldn't you want cash back on the money that you're spending? So to get started, download the free Upside app, use my promo code LOCKED, LOCKED, and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's almost half. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit card and debit card, and then you'll get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn up to 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. $1 million. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Who doesn't like making money? So download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, along with YouTube as well. So head to Locked On LSU on YouTube and just hit that subscribe button, and then you'll get a notification whenever the podcast drops. You'll get your LSU news instantly as soon as these podcasts drop. But moving forward to Mississippi State, this is a big one for Brian Kelly. And, I'll get into all of the full implications, exactly what this game means for LSU football, for this Brian Kelly coaching staff in year one. I'll get into all of that. We've got a full rest of the week to break all of that down. But I wanted to share a few updates that Brian Kelly shared with the media when he spoke at the podium the other day about 2 players that we did not see against Southern in week 2. So first and foremost, John Emery. We haven't seen John Emery in a game this year. Of course, we know that John Emery was academically ineligible in the 2021 season. And then he was in camp, and it was really kind of the Armani Goodwin and the Noah Kane show in fall camp. And at the time, I took that as Armani Goodwin and Noah Kane are just having just better backs. They look to be the running backs that are going to take a majority of the reps in games. And then, John Emery will be a supplemental piece. I kind of thought it'd be a running back by committee headed by Noah Kane and Armani Goodwin, and John Emery would be a passenger on that ship. Now I'm kind of comparing that to what I see with Micah Baskerville he played against Southern, balled out, had a great game. He got one of my defensive game balls. And we didn't see him take a whole lot of first team reps in fall camp because I can only assume because they didn't assume that he would be eligible for the first 2 games of the year. So now my question is John Emery really the second or third team back, Or did they just not want to take those first game reps away from the players who would be playing against Florida State and against Southern in those first 2 weeks of the year? Noah Cain and Armani Goodwin. And I don't know the answer to that, but Brian Kelly spoke with the media and gave an update on John Emery and kind of what to expect from him in his first game back since 2020.
Yeah, we're excited about getting John back, certainly, and I'm excited for him. It's been a long run for John in terms of getting a chance to, get out and play for LSU. He's worked hard to get back into this position, and now he gets an opportunity. Now let's be careful. Now he's been off for a while, to put a lot of expectations on him in the first game, we certainly can't do that. We've got other backs that have done really well. But he will be part of the mix, and make no mistake about it, we've seen his capabilities in camp. We've kept him active within our rotation, so he's ready to play, and we did that with, obviously our eyes toward the SEC competition coming up, so we're excited to get him back.
There you go. That was Brian Kelly on John Emery. And I think there's a good bit of coach speak going on there with Brian Kelly, because I think that he's simultaneously speaking to us, the fans, speaking to the media, and also simultaneously speaking to John Emery as well. In the beginning, you hear Brian Kelly couching the fact that they're excited to get John Emery back, which I don't doubt for a single second. You're not thrilled to have a good player back that can contribute to your offense. But he also couched it with, hey, let's keep the expectations low for John Emery. And that's only fair. John Emery has not played in a game since 2020. Okay, so, out the entire 2021 season, of course, limited in what he was able to do just due to eligibility issues. So I think that's a fair forewarning of saying, hey, it's going to take him a little bit of time to get reacclimated. That's normal. I understand that. That's to be expected. And then he goes on to say, hey, but we believe in him. He's a great player. He's going to contribute a lot for this football team. So I think he's telling the media, fans, hey, if he's not going to be Leonard Fournette or Darius Geis in the first game back, that's okay. That doesn't mean that we're out on John Emery. That just means that he needs a little bit of time. While also speaking to John Emery by saying, hey, even though I said that, we believe in you and we know that you're going to have a big comeback and we're excited for you to be part of this team. Coach speak is very, very interesting because they've got to play all different angles of it. So I do wonder which one is more the truth. And I think it has to be, what Brian Kelly is telling us to the media. I don't doubt that they're excited to have John Emery on the team. I don't doubt that they're excited to have him back. But I do think that they also themselves are wondering, how is he going to be in his first game back? Because there's not a ton of room for error. And once you start SEC play, once you play Mississippi State, if you want to throw in your guys who are getting, just getting used to college play, some of the guys lower on your depth chart against Southern, go for it by all means. I think that's a great strategy. You don't have a lot of time to get yourself acclimated against Mississippi State, especially a Mississippi State team that has so many returning veteran pieces. So I think that they are wondering themselves just as much as we are. We've seen him in fall camp. They know his ability, but you can never really predict how a player is going to react getting out there in the field and gameplay. So I think they're also asking themselves, how do we approach John Emery? Because we want to get him reacclimated, but we also don't want to set him up to fail. And we want to give this team the best possible chance to win a game. So I think that'll be interesting moving forward. But of course, adding some depth on this running back core, adding John Emery, a piece that's been, a part of this LSU program for a few years now. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to add some more depth, of course. And another player that we did not see against Southern, but we expect to see against Mississippi State. That's what Brian Kelly had to say.
Is BJ Ojulari going to be available this week?
We expect him to be available based upon my conversations with our doctors yesterday.
Thank you.
So appreciate the question because I think we're all asking it of, are we going to see BJ Ojulari against Mississippi State? Exactly what happened against Southern, because it was under my impression that he maybe got a little bit tweaked up in week 1 against Florida State. No need to play him against Southern. So go ahead and sit him, let him be on the sidelines, and give him an extra week to recover. That's really how I interpreted it. And I think that's exactly what's going on here. Couching it with, we got to, with the doctors, got to say what the doctors, got to follow what the doctors say, what the doctor's orders. But I think overall, I think BJ Ojulari will be fine. Just needed a week of rest, but it is good to have him back in the mix against Mississippi State. Also nice to have Ali Gay back in the mix. Of course, out that first half against Southern with the targeting call in week 1 against Florida State. So, that defensive 4 is close to full strength. Of course, no Mason Smith throughout the regular season, but it's good to have those 2 pieces that were missing in week 2 back against Mississippi State when you're really going to need it most, when you are going to have to put pressure on Will Rogers and that entire offensive line. But coming up next, I want to get into something that Brian Kelly mentioned in his press conference that honestly was not something that I really thought much about, but I thought was a really interesting point. But I also don't know how much I believe him. So we'll get into that coming up next after a couple of words from your sponsors. So Brian Kelly spoke to the media earlier this week, kind of recapping some thoughts from Southern, also looking ahead to Mississippi State, some updates on the roster, and also addressing some questions from the media. And he was asked a very interesting question from Matt Moscona. So good question from Matt Moscona about how he is approaching facing so many new head coaches. He never played against Mike Leach before. Of course, they know each other. They kind of ran in similar coaching trees, but has never played Mike Leach before. And that's not going to be the only time this season or throughout his entire tenure that Brian Kelly plays a coach for the first time. So how is he handling that? How is he approaching that? This is what Brian Kelly had to say.
What's it like for you trying to prep for maybe coaches and players and philosophies that you're learning for the first time?
The previous job I had, it was an independent schedule. So, it was somebody new each week in a sense, right? We had non-conference games every week. So it just feels normal. Like, all right, this is a new opponent, but I was so used to having new opponents on the schedule. So it doesn't feel that much different for me in terms of the preparation. We have advanced scouting. Our advanced scouting does a really good job of coming up with, their personnel and their tendencies. And it's just a matter of, how we're going to attack, offensively and defensively. But it doesn't feel foreign to me from that perspective.
So when he said that, I thought, you know what? That's a good point. I mean, this is a guy whose team plays, a recycling, different teams every single year. Playing new coaches isn't new to him. Yeah, scouting a new team, a new coaching staff, a new offensive system, new defensive system. That's not anything new to him. And then I thought, well, is it really? Because I understand him saying, I coach at an independent school at Notre Dame. We don't have a conference. You don't play Nick Saban every year. You don't play Lane Kiffin every year. So I did a little bit of digging. And I just took a 3-year sample size from his first 3 years at Notre Dame to see, well, if he's a coach that's so used to scouting new teams, new coaching staffs, playing new coaches, getting used to playing against different coaches, having to reacclimate yourself almost every single week, every single year, playing different coaches. How much did he really do that? So I took a 3-year sample size from his first 3 years at Notre Dame, 2010, 2011, 2012. I could have gone through the entire, 11, 12-year sample size that we have from Brian Kelly, looked at every single team that they played, looked at their coach, see how much turnover there was. I could have done that. I thought 3 years was easiest, and I thought 3 years was at least fair. His first 3 years, I think that's fair. Just to see really how many different coaches did he play year in and year out. So let's look at who they played in 2010. Notre Dame's schedule in 2010, Brian Kelly's first year as head coach. Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, Stanford, Boston College, Pitt, Western Michigan, Navy, Tulsa, Utah, Army, USC. Great. 2011, Brian Kelly's second year as head coach. South Florida, new one. Michigan, they played them in 2010. Michigan State, played them in 2010. Pitt, played them in 2010. Purdue, opened the 2010 season with Purdue. Air Force, who Notre Dame plays literally all the time, every year. USC played them in 2010. Navy also played them in 2010 and also play them every freaking year. Wake Forest did not play them in 2010, but played them in 2012. Maryland, that was a new one. Boston College played them in 2010. Stanford played them in 2010. Let's look at 2012 because you may have had a couple home and homes, a couple back and forth there. 2012. Opened the season with Navy. They played them in 2010 and 2011. Purdue played them 2010 and 2011. Michigan State, again, same thing. Michigan, same thing. Miami, they did play in 2012. Stanford, same thing. Played them 2010 and 2011. BYU, that was a different one. Oklahoma, different one. Pitt played them in 2011 and 2010. Boston College, same thing. Played them the previous 2 years. Wake Forest played them in 2011. And then USC, they played them in 2010. I know that's only a 3-year sample size. And I know that you have coaching turnover, but in Purdue, the 3 times they played them, they played the same coach, Jenny Hope, all 3 years. Michigan, they played them 3 times. They played Rich Rodriguez 1 year, and then Brady Hoke took over the next 2 years as head coach. Michigan State, they had the same head coach all 3 years, Mark D'Antonio. Stanford, Harbaugh was the head coach in 2010, and then David Shaw took over the following years and still the reigning head coach. Boston College had the same head coach those 3 years that they played. Pitt, same thing. Pitt was 3 different head coaches. So that was kind of a fluky, weird thing. But that happens in every conference. You're going to have teams that have constant turnover in coaches year after year after year. Look at Tennessee. They have new coaches every year. And then Navy, they played them 3 times and had the same coach all 3 years. And the same head coach is now at Navy still. So I know that that's a 3-year sample size out of a 10, 11, 12-year tenure at Notre Dame. I know that, there were some changes with Notre Dame and now they play more ACC teams year in and year out. I know that changes happen. And I know that, maybe a 3-year sample size isn't the most fair, but I don't have all the time in the world. But also that to me, if this is a 3-year sample size, multiply it by 4, you probably have similar turnover and similar consistencies year after year after year. So I hear Brian Kelly saying that, hey, I'm used to this. I play different teams every year. Well, really, really, no, you don't. You play Army, Navy, and Air Force literally every year. Boston College every year. You have a rotation of ACC schools that you play every year. Really, you don't play different coaches all the time. Maybe really you don't have as much experience scouting new coaches and new teams as maybe you really thought that you did, because this is a completely different wheelhouse. You're not going to have the same turnover from, Pitt, Boston College, and Wake Forest year after year. Those coaches aren't coaching in the SEC now. These are new. He's never coached against Mike Leach before. I don't know if he's ever coached against Lane Kiffin, maybe at USC. I don't know. But my point being, this is a completely different ball game. I know Brian Kelly's coached against Nick Saban before. There's going to be coaches that he's familiar with. That's just how coaching works. That's how these coaching trees work. But in terms of being so used to new coaching staffs, I call BS there, because from what I saw in those 3 years, you saw a whole heck of a lot of the same coaches. And also, let's be completely fair here. Because I understand that, if you're an independent, you probably do, in the span of 10 years, you probably do play more head coaches or more of a variety of different head coaches across those 10 years than you would if you coached in the SEC or the ACC or a conference. I get that. You probably do play a few more coaches and you probably do see some more mix up. But there's a whole lot of coaching turnover in conferences too. And also, let's not forget that you play a different, at least in the SEC, you play one different SEC team every year. So that could be a different head coach that you have not seen. You play different out of conference games as well. So you got to get used to scheming those coaches as well. So it really never stops. I don't think that Brian Kelly has a unique skill of scouting different coaches because he coached at Notre Dame. I think that's what every coach does. But sometimes you just might see some of those coaches more frequently or more often. I don't think it's that big of a difference. But all of that to be said is I think that one of the most interesting aspects of this game on Saturday is to see how Brian Kelly fares against a coach that he has never coached against before, to see how Brian Kelly fares, not just coaching against an SEC coach and Mike Leach, but also just in an SEC environment where the stakes are incredibly high. I think it's going to be interesting to see, if Brian Kelly says, this isn't anything new for me. I'm comfortable with this. This isn't something new to me coming from an independent school. It's not new to you. And it's also not new to any other coach out there. But if it's not new to you, then how do you fare? Because there's going to be more and more head coaches coming down the pipe, not just this season, but throughout the rest of his tenure at LSU. Coaches change. You see new coaches. You got to scheme new coaches. You got to scout new coaches. That's just a part of it. So how does Brian Kelly fare? 1, in his first matchup against Mike Leach. 2, in his first SEC matchup. And 3, in an SEC environment. And I guess we'll see. And it will be interesting to see from all those new coaches he's scouted and all those different, schemes that he's coached against. How can you fare at LSU? And I think that's going to be the really interesting thing here. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And coming up on tomorrow's podcast, we'll take a look at the SEC, some of the teams that LSU is going to face down the line. How are they looking so far in week 2? Plus, we'll also speak with an Mississippi State football insider and get his insight on the team as well to get you set for this matchup on Saturday. But you can get more on the SEC by making Locked On SEC your second listen. Everyday host Chris Gordy and the local experts of Locked On take you across the SEC in 30 minutes. Make Locked On SEC your second listen.